decades-old profession-wide question that demands answers. Where are all the women in engineering? Ontario's engineering regulator wants to dive deeper into why this is and what we can do to create a culture of belonging where every engineer and aspiring engineer can see a place for themselves in the profession. By the end of this podcast, you will hear how women engineers at the top of their careers navigated being the only person like them in the room, and why future leaders in engineering need to have representation from women. My name is Emily Nichols, and I am the host of this special podcast by Professional Engineers Ontario in collaboration with Siemens Canada. I am also a professional engineer and a professional speaker, and although those things don't seem to go together at first, speaking was always a part of my engineering career right from my very first job, where I delivered training sessions in continuous improvement inside of our plant. In a recent article in PEO's magazine, Engineering Dimensions, they asked the question, where are all the women? Now, it's no secret that women are underrepresented in the engineering profession. In 2024, Engineers Canada reported that of 17,000 graduates from Canadian accredited engineering programs, only 23% were women. Only 23%. And then there's the drop-off, because not all women stay in the profession. Engineers Canada's 30 by 30 initiative aims to address this issue, and yet, despite strides over the past years, Ontario has plateaued at just over 20% of newly licensed engineers who are women. According to PEO's most recent data, if we consider all of the professionally licensed engineers across all of the years, only about 15% of engineers in Ontario are women. So, what do we do about that? Inspiring the next generation starts long before university or licensure. The research shows that it begins with how we engage young students in STEM. By age 6, girls already associate brilliance with boys, discouraging them from pursuing ambitious professions like engineering. However, research from the University of Wisconsin shows that there is no difference in math skills between girls and boys. Success in math is shaped by culture, not gender. Girls have the same potential as boys. We just need to build a world that shows them they do, because this impacts what they study, the jobs they want to do after graduation, and the workplaces that we create. Today, I'm joined with representatives from engineering academia, industry, and regulation to tackle this very challenge. Jennifer Qualietta is a professional engineer who currently is the CEO and Registrar of Professional Engineers Ontario. Marilyn Powers is a professional engineer and is the Dean of Engineering and Technology and Applied Computer Science and IT. What a mouthful, Marilyn, at Conestoga College. And Natalia Malafiva is also a professional engineer and is the Director of Higher Education and Sustainability at Siemens Canada. Together, we are going to discuss this critical question. Where are all the women in engineering, and how can we create environments where women feel they belong and can thrive? So why now? Well, June 23rd marks International Women in Engineering Day. It's a day to celebrate the many successes of women in engineering across the world. So I'm curious to know, what does International Women in Engineering Day mean to you? Natalia, let's start with you.
It means celebration of women and recognizing that women play a role in the engineering field, as simply as that. As you just mentioned, the University of Wisconsin study, girls are capable, but where are they? So to me, it's an opportunity for us to celebrate advancement of women, abilities of women, and draw attention that women are capable and we're here to advance that profession.
Okay, thank you. Marilyn, same question to you. What does International Women in Engineering Day mean?
So very similarly, I think it's a chance to celebrate and draw attention to this. And I think a lot of young girls don't even know what engineering is. I talk to them a lot about, well, why did you choose XYZ over engineering? And most of them are like, I just don't know what an engineer does, right? So it's a chance to draw attention to it, and a chance to say, this is who women in engineering are, and this is what it could look like to have it as a career.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because we also know from the research that many, many engineers have parents or family members who are engineers. So that speaks to the fact that when you're asking this question, they're saying, well, I don't know what an engineer does. That is quite prevalent
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've even heard some. So there are colleges and universities out there that have common first years, and they mix them with other things. So at McMaster, they mix it with health sciences for the first year. And I've heard women tell me that they went into health sciences and didn't realize they would like the engineering. Wow. So, and then when they got in there, they were like, well, I'm switching to the engineering program. I didn't know I liked problem solving.
That's very
It's very
cool.
interesting.
Yeah. Jennifer, what does International Women in Engineering Day? What a mouthful that is. What does it mean to you?
So in PEO's 104-year history, I'm proud to be the first woman to lead this organization in the dual role. I was hired 3.5 years ago, and it's been just marvelous ever since. But engineering, as we all have mentioned, has had a real longstanding challenge with gender parity. If we ever get to parity, maybe we should aim to just get the 30 by 30 done.
Yeah.
But on days like this, I'm so proud and so humbled to be sitting beside fellow leaders and mentors who are role modeling what is possible for women in this field. Because I think together, it's instances like this where we're creating that culture of belonging, where every engineer and aspiring engineer, regardless of their gender or their background, can see themselves in our profession.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think is so interesting about a day like this is that we need to celebrate the gains that have happened. And we're also trying to figure out how to close the gap that remains, which in this particular issue is pretty huge. And I think sometimes that is challenging for people to understand what is an observance day like this for, because some organizations, some employers are focused on like, well, let's celebrate. And that's great, but also we want to make things better for the future. So Marilyn, if we think about your role as dean and what schools can do to increase the representation of women in engineering, help them stay in the program, help them stay in the profession after graduation, what do you think is the role of schools?
You know, I think they can probably play a bigger role than they probably do now. One of the big roles they play is getting more women interested in coming into the school, right? So they're out there, they're doing outreach, trying to talk to anybody from K to grade 12. We have Go Eng Girl that almost all of the schools participate with to bring in girls into the schools and give them a day in the life of an engineer, sort of some experiences. So they do that. So that funnel is getting better. Innovative programs. So some schools have very innovative programs that are attracting more women into engineering, and biomedical engineering is a big one. Combining it with health sciences is another big one. But I've also seen some great strides being made when you just have a lot of women professors that are reaching out to other women who are applying, and those are making great headway. Once you're in the school, it becomes very much dependent on the school and the professors that are there and what they say. So we do have chances to bring in the PEO and OSB to talk to the women and, well, actually everyone, talk to everybody about what the profession is. Tell them about there's a regulated profession. This is all the things that could be happening. They tend to do that in that first week at school. When the students are just like, what, I just got here. What are you talking about 5 years from now? I don't care yet. So that happens. And then we try to do it again right before they graduate so that they know. Here's what I heard from some students that I've talked to recently, though. Once they're in there, especially in programs where there's not many women, they said anything to boost my confidence, that those guys who have blind confidence also to tell me they don't know what they're doing either, don't follow them, to have some confidence. So I heard a lot of that from the women that I reached out to, who were just saying, I need mentors. I need to know the women that are in third and fourth year. I need them to tell me which professors to watch out for, what assignments to concentrate on, which things I need to be doing now, how to prepare for my co-op term. Bringing in more, so we have most engineering schools have co-op, and most of us participate in co-op. And this is a great opportunity for women to get out and see what's possible out there. But they said, bring some in. Let us hear from the industry ahead of time so that we know what that looks like. And giving them confidence, just by giving them a little knowledge of what's going to happen when they hit the workforce and what that might look like. So more spaces to talk about these things and to figure out how to get there. And then after that, it all comes down to the representation right through. So they're looking for, is the dean a woman? Is my chair a woman? Is my professor a woman? Because they find that they have someone to bond with a little bit just because of the gender, which they said, when you have a male professor, the males automatically gravitate, they ask questions, and they talk about the most common one I heard was cars. They talk about cars and baseball. And if you don't care about those two things, you're in trouble. You might not be able to make that bond. So they were just looking for somebody who might have different interests and be aligned with them. So there's many things that the schools can be doing on top of what they do, because right now it's dependent on whatever the faculty tell them and whatever the student-led group organizes. So you can imagine if the student-led group is all men, nothing's getting done for what the women want to do. So making sure that there's some chances for them to get leadership opportunities as well.
Okay. Natalia, you have shared your story about pursuing licensure a little bit later than some people do. So what ultimately led to your decision to be licensed as a professional engineer?
I'm happy to share this story. Let's acknowledge for a moment, it's a little bit of a vulnerability point for me, but I want other people to know. Because when I came to Canada 20 years ago, I was not only a new immigrant, I was also a new grad. And upon studying requirements to become licensed, I made a plan for myself, and I made a decision that my next thing to do is to find the right job in my field and gain that necessary experience to get licensed. So luckily, at some point, I am in the right industry, gaining that valuable experience. But what started happening is that the more projects I did, the higher the bar went up for me. Every time I was thinking, maybe it's time to apply, I was reflecting back and telling myself, well, Natalia, last time you did this project, you didn't know X, Y, and Z. And, oh, you haven't had experience with ABC. So wait, you're not ready yet to apply. So it took me time to come to a decision to apply. And what changed? It was by pure chance that I believe it was September 2022, when I was already like 14 years into my career, I joined PEO's 30 by 30 update call run by Tracy. And I heard very interesting statistic on that call, on that webinar, talking about women's participation in the profession and how maybe 25% of women in university and college programs, in engineering programs are women, but by the time we get to licensure, that percentage is much smaller. And it became an eye-opening experience for me. I started realizing, oops, I'm one of those women who are contributing to that negative statistic. So then I had this conversation with myself, and I told myself, Natalia, if you don't apply now for licensure, you might not apply ever. And also, there was this mindset shift in me. I was thinking, I'm waiting for this perfect moment to feel ready, to feel confident when I can call myself an engineer to apply. So I want others who would listen to this, if you feel this way, please don't follow my example and just apply.
That is so interesting. Thank you. So Jennifer, as the regulator, of course, you have a front row seat to these statistics about the fact that the percentage of women getting licensed is so much lower than the percentage of women graduating from engineering programs. And so what do you make of that?
Listen, I think you shared some really interesting and really important metrics in your opening remarks where we haven't really seen the dial move. And so even if we take a step back beyond just women in engineering and even just look more broadly at women across the board in STEM, they still only make up 25% of those who are employed in STEM careers across the country. And then if you look at those women who are in undergraduate studies still and in higher academic institutions, as of 2022, they still also only represent 25% of the population. And if you go back 20 years before that, we've only moved the dial by about 4%. So we haven't really moved the dial. And I think that's something that we need to think about. But we have more than just theories for why this is. And there is persistent systemic barriers to women's advancement in engineering that exist today. We all know about the gender stereotypes. We talked a little bit about that in your opening remarks as well, for the belief that, boys are stronger in STEM than girls. And we just need to get over that.
It's time.
It's time. But we also have work experience barriers. And to this, PEO conducted a gender audit study that was completed just last year. And it looked at our licensing processes and our potential barriers that exist. And it found that women's skills are no different than men's, nor are their abilities. It found that women struggle to gain that experience, Natalia, what you were speaking to apply for their license as compared to their male counterparts. Women early in their careers who graduated from a Canadian accredited engineering program were less likely to submit their experience, their 48 months of experience, once they began the application as compared to their male counterparts. And when they did finally submit that experience, they often not just took longer to put it together, but they wrote so much more.
Oh,
Almost to be able to prove and further demonstrate that they actually had that experience and were capable of achieving that license. And the final thing that you spoke about, Marilyn, is supports and role models and mentors. And there is a lack of mentors in the sector. And women struggle to find engineering supervisors. And so if you take a step back again and say, well, if a woman can't find a technical supervisor to oversee their work, then they can't apply for licensure. But then they also cannot apply for advancement in the engineering field because they don't have access to gain that experience that would allow them to progress their career. And so then they're not even being interviewed for those roles. And so it really is this whole cascading ladder of a lack of supports right from the outset, not just like it continues after their academic training and continues on into the workforce. And altogether, these gendered challenges with the experience requirement predicted women's higher intentions of quitting the licensure process altogether. And it really is no surprise that women struggle to enter and stay in the profession if they're facing these barriers. Some of them we are at PEO working to address. And so one of the things we're really proud of is, as the regulator, we take seriously that we have a responsibility to promote the profession to the point where it reflects the diversity of the public that we serve. We're guided by an anti-racism and equity code, and we've been working to fulfill the 8 guiding principles that are listed in that code to help transform how the sector operates and acts. And one thing is we've updated our licensing processes to reflect those realities. And so in 2023, we were the first regulator in Ontario to remove the Canadian experience requirement for international applicants, about 8 months before required to do so. And today we have over 900 volunteers that support the organization. And last year, they all were given access to EDI training. And as well, last year we launched our first demographic survey so that we can collect data so that we can better understand what our population of engineers looks like. And that will allow us to make better decisions that impact working professionals. So my advice, I would say, is especially to engineering employers, hire based on abilities, hire based on skills. And once you've hired someone into your organization, you do need to create that culture of belonging so that people stay and they're engaged. And we should still continue to implement women in engineering programs. It's an important piece. I know Siemens has a program that is very active, and provide those mentorship opportunities so that women can gain the experience they need in order to apply for a license.
Wow. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
But I love that you are asking employers to step up, to hire based on skills and abilities. And I would say employers have a big part to play in encouraging licensure.
Well, in my case, in the role I was in, my manager was encouraging me to apply, but it didn't feel like a deal breaker for me, whether I had license or not. However, I have to say what the employer was doing right is listening to the voices like mine and my colleagues who, again, I'm referring back to the PEO 30 by 30 update, that day of September 2022, when I learned about statistics in engineering profession. It was myself and my colleague Lisa when we heard those statistics and we realized that, again, I'm one of those who contribute to those numbers, and we as an engineering employer must do something. So we built a case. It took us some time. It didn't happen overnight, but I prepared a presentation to our CEO, Faisal Kazi, and I built a business case why supporting all of the engineers is important for an engineering organization, but also with a special focus on women. So Jennifer, thank you for kindly mentioning our engineering development program. What we are doing is we're applying a nudge approach, the opt-out approach that, again, I learned from PEO, where we assume that any engineering graduate is on the pathway to get licensed. Mm-hmm. And only through direct conversation with their manager, they may choose to opt out. Maybe they have different plans, right? However, assumption is you're an engineer, and if you're responsible for engineering duties, this is the process. Secondly, as part of this engineering program is we encourage managers to provide mindful assignment of work tasks, again, to help engineers, especially women engineers, to gain that valuable experience. I also have to celebrate another thing at Siemens is that things that we do throughout entire organization are governed by our sustainability framework. And one of the KPIs is gender equity, right? So all encompassed, I do believe that employers play a very significant role, like mentorships, right? You mentioned mentorships are very important. And we do have a program that helps connect mentees and mentors. And I want to say that employers do have responsibility. And I also want to encourage engineering graduates to take ownership of their career path, right? And ask the questions to their employer. What are they doing in helping them to become licensed? So yeah, that's what we do, and that's what are the possibilities among engineering employers.
Wow, that's great. I love that you mentioned the nudge approach, and that came from PEO.
Yes,
like that's a technique from behavioral economics. I mean, that's a really effective way to help people with behavior change. So that's really interesting that Siemens is using that approach of assuming that everybody's on the path to licensure unless they specifically opt out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah, Marilyn, did you have a follow-up?
No, I was going to say very similar. I love the nudge and that flipping the expectation. Because I think I heard too many times throughout my career, well, do you need it? And that was always the question. But if it's no, the expectation is you are on your way to get the licensure, then it just helps. Everybody just feels at ease. Oh, okay, I'll just do that then.
It changes the narrative.
Marilyn, we've talked a lot about the pathway to licensure, and beyond what's been said, do you think there's anything additional that schools need to be doing, or how might schools implement that nudge approach to help students understand that they're sort of on the pathway to licensure unless they have a specific different plan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more thoughtful instead of just talking about it when they enter and as they're leaving, but much more becoming a narrative while they're in school. So working that throughout some of their curriculum. I know at my school, what I do is I work with the engineering society, and we're teaching them a lot of like, this is how you do governance in this society. This is how you pass, some decisions. This is how you run events. But maybe we should be nudging them more into, invite PEO, invite OSPE, invite mentors, and start talking about the expectation that you will be a licensed engineer when you graduate. I think that would be something very valuable for them, and help us out in the long run, and get rid of that question of should I or should I not, but just talk about, yep, this is your profession and this is what you've chosen. And I think it's a great thing. I'm just going to talk about the something that another dean from another province said once about self-regulation and the obligation of becoming a professional engineer. Because if you believe that engineers should be deciding what engineers can do and not politicians and not business people or finance people, then you should join and get your professional engineering license so that you can have a say in regulation. And that being sort of an underlying thing, which is important.
Yeah, which kind of speaks to the moral, ethical obligation of becoming a licensed engineer. And I'm curious about that because another part of licensure is the ethics exam. And so I'm wondering, what do you think schools could do? Do you think schools should be helping and encouraging students to take that ethics exam as soon as they graduate or as they're graduating, rather than waiting until the experience requirements have been met?
And I'll just inject to say we just changed that regulation to allow students to write that as soon as they graduate.
Fantastic.
Instead of having to write it once you're in the application process. So things are changing to remove barriers and allow access to these types of processes that you need to sort of complete before you can apply.
Right. And a big one is once you're out of the, school, and the longer it takes to apply for a license, the less likely you are to continue going down that path. So that's great that regulation is changing, because the students do want to write it. Almost all of them, I think most schools have an ethics course in their fourth.
I'm putting the plug in.
Yes, most do in their fourth year. It's not really an elective. I mean, at my school, it is one. Everyone takes it in their last semester. So what a better way but then to write your exam right after, and while it's all fresh in your head, that's going to help. And they do work in ethics, because in the schools we're very much working towards graduate attributes that the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board has set out. So there's 12 of those, and one of the ones is ethics. And it is worked in throughout the classes all the way through the 4 years that they're in school.
So maybe now is a good time to talk about after women have graduated, right? We've talked a lot about what's happening in school systems and so on. How do we support women so that they can stay in this profession? And besides licensure, are there some major barriers we need to address why women are leaving?
I'm happy to start. I think, we spoke a lot about the need for mentorship and supports. And, I myself am very inspired by all of the mentors who stepped in to support young women and girls on their pathway. And I think there is an opportunity for that role modeling and mentorship to be present, not just in university or college accredited programs, but it has to start much earlier in helping young girls understand that they're on that pathway, that they can be on that pathway. It continues into high school to encourage women to take physics, because if you don't take physics, you can't apply to an engineering program. And so that's a huge piece right there. And I think, change will continue to happen as long as we're all persistent and we have that shared desire to make this happen and make it work, and to continue having these conversations and really creating that open and safe space where women feel invited to belong. The mentorship for me I remember being in my first year of chemical engineering at U of T, too many decades ago now, but I was mentored. I was, my apologies, partnered with a mentor. Her name was Rui, and she did marvelous things for me. I mean, I had always aspired to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's why I became an engineer. And I did biomedical classes as part of my chemical engineering degree. But my mentor was a chemical engineer who became a doctor. And the program that they had at that time was really intentional. And it was Rui who, opened the doors to healthcare and a whole other sector that I had no idea about, because I'm one of the first women across, I'm going to say 19 first cousins. I'm the first woman in my family outside of my mom to go to university. And so mentorship and support and role models are really important.
Wow, thank you for that.
I'll add on, just Marilyn and I were at a conference yesterday with 300 women.
Yes.
And two things. One was this concept that mentorship is needed and good, but which is good to sort of show you the way. But a supporter is even more important, because they're the ones that bring you into the room or invite you to the table.
Oh, a champion, yes.
A champion.
Sponsor, right?
A sponsor.
Yeah.
And the other piece was something around when you have one woman at the table, it's
a token.
It's a token.
Two
women at the table is, I couldn't remember.
I have the
But
note.
we need
I have it
3.
written.
We need to get to 3, because it's only when you have 3 women at a table that you actually have a voice
That's right.
at the
I'm
table.
so glad you said
It's
that.
a presence.
Presence. That's
Okay.
it. Yes.
1 is a token, 2 is presence, 3 is a voice.
Wow.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you said that, because that was the point I wanted to come back to about mentorship and belonging, because the research shows us that in school, like in the engineering courses where there is group work, it is a best practice, if there aren't that many women in the class, to not spread them out 1 per group.
That's
right?
right.
That's the research shows us that is not very effective, that you should have, I thought, at least 2, and you're saying it's
We're
3.
saying 3 now.
Okay. So I'm just thinking about how this might apply in the workplace, or, you talked about co-op programs, how important that is, so that when students go out and they experience the workplace, I think, and that could be an important, we probably can't make it a criteria yet because there aren't enough, right? But that would make for such an excellent co-op experience if you get to work in a place where there is more than one other woman, or that you're not the only one in the room.
Yeah, I was surprised when I talked to several women students that they are the only woman in the engineering group that they're in. And I was fortunate enough to also be in biomedical engineering, which is very heavily women. When I first started, my group was all women. So
Mine too.
Yeah.
Not me, I was one of the guys, always. Yeah.
I want to go back to the mentorship question,
Yes.
because one thing that happens is women get out into the workforce and they can't find a good mentor. It doesn't exist. So I think there's some work we have to do. And I'm very impressed that you had all your volunteers open to the EDI training. Is I think we need to train more of the engineers that are, not just the women, but all engineers on what does it look like to be a mentor? What does that mean? And a little bit more about systemic barriers, because what I find is when people believe that there's no difference and everybody's equal, is that they don't understand that there are systemic barriers that have gotten us here, and that we do have to be a little more intentional to tear those down, or else we just continue to propagate the old biases that existed.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's really important. I think we've touched on a couple times, we've mentioned a few different programs that are not specifically just for women, they're for everybody. And we need that because, like Jennifer said, we haven't moved the dial that much in 20 years. How do we move the dial? I believe it's by including men and making sure that they understand that they have a part to play in taking down these systemic barriers and mentoring. And it's not something that should be handed to the women to solve. It's not a women's problem, right?
No.
It's a
Exactly.
problem for professions and
Yes,
schools and employers
absolutely.
to solve. Yeah.
True.
So if we reflect back on our conversation, I'm curious to know from each of you if you could just leave our listeners with one piece of advice out of everything that you shared today, what would that one piece of advice be?
Drawing from my personal experience that I shared in the beginning, progress over perfection. Right? Let's not get focused too much on did I meet all of the criteria. Let's just make one step towards the goal. And then if needed, we can revisit, but progress over perfection became my mantra in the past few years in life.
Oh, so when we think about licensure, it feels like a big project, and you're saying
Yes.
you got to break it down into the smaller steps. And
Exactly. How to eat an
celebrate-
elephant,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Okay. Very good. How about you, Marilyn?
I'm reflecting on when we talked about mentorship and supports, the supports looks different than we may have thought earlier. And definitely earlier in my career, when I thought of a women's group and what support looked like, it wasn't something I needed. But now what I'm understanding is the supports are more of a help me understand that my perception's a little off, that I'm perceiving they're more confident. They aren't. They look like it to me. It's sort of like what you were saying with the perfection thing as well. Like I'm not that, so I can't be doing it yet. So, and support's much more along the way of making sure that there's that they understand they're on the same playing field. And then also make sure the playing field is level.
Yes.
I'll share a story of what I'll call the bridge keeper. There was once a bridge keeper whose job was to inspect a really long, vital bridge every day. The bridge connected two cities. Thousands of people crossed it every day. Most never thought about it twice. They simply trusted that it would hold. Each morning, the bridge keeper walked its full length. She checked every joint and every cable and every bolt. Day after day, the work felt the same. Nothing felt like it was changing. No one stopped to thank her. One afternoon, she noticed a small crack forming in the support beam, and she flagged it. She repaired it. She reinforced it. And the next day, the bridge carried on as if nothing had happened at all. No headlines, no recognition, just quiet continuation. Years later, another engineer reviewing the bridge said, "Do you know that if that crack had gone unnoticed, this entire structure could have failed?" The bridge keeper never knew, but every person who crossed that bridge did so safely because of the work that no one ever saw. And so I'll go back to this work is often repetitive. It's unseen. It's sometimes really heavy. It's oftentimes thankless. It's always consequential. And we don't measure success in this field by what happens. We actually measure it by what doesn't happen, right? Making sure that every decision we make is fair. Every investigation we do is thoughtful. Every moment we choose integrity over expediency. We are reinforcing that bridge. And like the bridge keeper, we will never see the lives that we impact, but that doesn't make the work any less important. It actually makes it essential. And if you think about a woman's work, whether it's in the home, whether it's caring for an elder, upbringing children, sponsoring and mentoring so many other people, doing the quiet work, we're often never encouraged or reminded that it's the work and that it should be an opt-out, as you said, and not when I have time. And so it's to reflect on, it's time to put yourself first. It's time perhaps to be a little bit selfish. And it's time to move past numbers and parity and really work towards that inclusive environment, regardless of the number and regardless of the genders who comprise that community, but to make it a place where everybody feels like they belong and are invited and encouraged and told to get going.
Oh, thank you. I love that you shared that in a story. That's really great. You know, as I reflect on what I would like to leave listeners with, I think back more than 10 years, I was interviewed for International Women in Engineering Day, and they asked me, Emily, what is your dream for women in engineering? And, you know, at the time I thought, what a weird question. Like, I hate that we have to have this discussion at all. What I dream of is a day where we have a workplace that feels inclusive, where you can belong and be recognized for your work, and where we don't have to have this discussion anymore. So I think that in any situation where we are striving to close a large gap, we have to sometimes remember that the goal isn't just incremental progress. It's how can we obliterate this thing? And so that's what I'd like to leave our listeners with is like, how do we finish this issue so we can move on to more important things like creating the technology that our society needs to thrive? So thank you. This has been an amazing discussion, and I learned a
Very
lot.
good. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your honesty and your candor. You mentioned vulnerability. Thank you so much for sharing. You can find information on our guests and their organizations in the links in the description. To our listeners, thank you. Through podcasts like this, we are getting the words engineering and women in the same sentence more often. The more that we raise the profile of women in engineering, the more women will be encouraged to pursue this career path. Now, to summarize today's discussion, I want to leave you with this. To the women listening, seek out mentors. To women in leadership positions, be a mentor. And to employers, create inclusive workplace cultures to encourage women to stay in engineering and give women the opportunity to gain experience in the field. And to all the folks listening, please be an ally in our effort to create environments where everyone from all backgrounds can belong. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.